So Donald Trump is threatening to sue the BBC over their abysmal, biased coverage of him, which has now led to two of the senior positions actually resigning. Okay, so if you don't know what I'm talking about, the BBC's Director General, Tim Davie, and the head of news, Devorah Turnus, have resigned after criticism that a Panorama documentary misled viewers by editing a speech by Donald Trump. Okay, now, what actually happened in this video? We reviewed it in the past, so you can go watch it. But they took Donald Trump's speech on January 6th, in which he was saying, let's go down to the Capitol and support our congresswoman or whatever. And then they doctored it to bring in a part where he then goes, well, and we're going to go fight, and we'll fight for something along those lines. And then they connect it to make it sound like he's telling people, let's go down to fight, which is not what happened. Okay? This caused such a hullabaloo because it really made it look like Trump had incited people into this hatred, which was not the case at all. The speech was actually very peaceful and very nice. And the BBC came under so much fire that the people had to resign. Okay, they had to resign. But this whole story bothered me, and I'll tell you why it bothered me. Because for the last year, or for the last 2 years, there have been endless reports from NGO Monitor, from Camera, who are claiming that twice a week they had to send in editorial comments because of skewed coverage of Israel. We've got reports such as them saying things like this. Okay, one second. Let me pull it up. Bear with me for a second. Oh, I lost it. Of course I lost it. Okay. This is a direct quote. A leaked BBC memo told staff that the argument over how much aid has crossed into Gaza is irrelevant and instructed them to blame Israel regardless of the facts. This is from the European Conservative, okay? We've got NGO Monitor who's come out showing the skewed coverage like crazy, the numbers in how much they presented the Gaza story versus Israel and the wording that they used, like freedom fighters for the Palestinians and the terrible terrorist IDF and stuff like that. I don't know if they actually called the IDF terrorists. I want to be careful with my words. But they skewed it. And you have BBC in England going after Israel like crazy. And you have the Jews screaming from the rooftop saying there is so much anti-Semitism being caused because of this biased reporting. And we've seen it time and time and time again. We've had BBC workers who are Jewish leave and say, you don't understand how skewed this is. And the BBC in England is totally accepted as normal. It's just accepted as like an unbiased media reporting house. But now we're seeing that they have zero problem in properly doctoring content to prove their political beliefs. Like Trump. They went after Donald Trump and they doctored video evidence that would be very, very easy to find. And what bothers me about this, besides the fact that I'm very happy Donald Trump should absolutely bankrupt the living daylights out of the BBC and go after them because it's abysmal, is that when the Jews complain about something, when people put the word Jews or Israel into something, people's ears go deaf. They stop hearing it. Israel has been saying for so long, the Jews have been saying for so long, there's so much evidence. Twice a week, Camera submitted issues with the BBC's coverage. Twice a week. And there are over 200 editorial changes that they had to make because of Camera's submissions. This is something that the Jews have been saying, that the BBC is unbelievably biased and nobody's had to resign, nobody's had to change. And that bothers me. Obviously, Donald Trump being doctored is nuts. But I just wish that when the Jews said something, when we said there is something really wrong here, and we provided the evidence, that people wouldn't just disregard it. Do we have anything to play? Do we have a responsibility in that? Maybe we cry for anti-Semitism too much. But the media coverage has been directly responsible for so much damage. I mean, do you remember the crazy BBC controversy where they did a whole documentary about the Gazan plights and it turned out that they'd hired a Hamas child of a Hamas terrorist to narrate the entire documentary? Even that story didn't get the BBC shut down. Even that story. And still, till this day, you have the Palestinians out there being like, the BBC, they cover unfavorably to the Palestinians, which is so incorrect. And they have all of these documentation and this proof that maybe one day we'll review and go over it because obviously Mehdi, the most Mehdi is out there being like, look at the BBC, they're actually so pro-Israel, it's disgusting. Again, all wrong, all inaccurate, and very exhausting. But I just want you guys to notice, and I feel frustrated about it. We have been saying for so long that the BBC is wrong, and it takes something like this for people to actually believe it. And I've had enough of that because people should believe us when we say something's not okay. When I say that the BBC is unbiased and we have huge amounts of reports and evidence to present this, when we say this about the UN, when we say this about these organizations, about UNRWA, about USAID, when we say these things and we provide the evidence, no one's listening. And I find that frustrating Thank God that people listen to Trump. And Trump's actually going to be able to expose them, and hopefully he'll bankrupt the living daylights out of them, and everybody will see that they really are biased. But it's frustrating to me that if a Jew or an Israeli are involved in a story, it's irrelevant. It's not really true, despite ample evidence. And I just wanted to rant about that today. Thank you for your attention to this matter.